Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth always finds a mic. Grab a seat, and let me tell you how my wife's little performance blew up in her face the moment I stopped playing the quiet fool. There was no dramatic breakup, no cheating caught red-handed, no screaming match under fluorescent kitchen lights. What happened to me was quieter, slower, like being boiled alive in compliments with claws hidden underneath. I didn't walk in on her with someone else. I walked in on myself, on the man I had become. You know how you can feel when something's wrong, but it's all just barely under the surface? Like static in the background that never quite clears? That was my life with Taryn. From the outside, we looked fine, smiling for photos, hosting dinner parties, saying things like date night, even though I was the only one who ever planned anything. But inside, I was shrinking. Every joke she made chipped a little deeper. Every time she cut me off mid-sentence to correct a story I lived. Every eye roll in front of people I barely knew. It was a slow erosion of who I used to be. And maybe you're thinking, why didn't you stand up for yourself? Great question. Because when you love someone, really love them, you don't see the disrespect as disrespect. Not at first. You see it as you not being good enough. You tell yourself, I need to be more interesting. I need to be less awkward. I need to learn to take a joke. But it wasn't a joke the day she asked me, with a camera rolling, to come out and serve drinks to her friends while they filmed a TikTok. Not a casual one. A rehearsed skit, where I was supposed to walk in, look confused and helpless, while she snapped her fingers and said, "Sorry ladies, he's cute but useless. I'll pour it myself." The video got 37,000 views. And yes, I saw the comments. Poor guy. Bet he folds laundry like a pro though. He looks like a substitute teacher who cries during staff meetings. That was the moment something flipped. Not loudly, not in anger, just a very quiet, very cold click inside me. I stopped replying with laughter. I stopped chasing the scraps of affection. I stopped asking, are we okay? Because I knew. We weren't. We hadn't been for a long time. And she liked it that way. She liked being the sun in every room. And me? I was just the dull moon orbiting her spotlight. Until one night, at yet another one of her social gatherings, she went too far. It was her birthday. She rented out a rooftop space, invited 30 people, and told me to try not to embarrass her this time. She handed me a printed script. A literal script. "You're going to read this during the toast," she said, touching up her lipstick. "Stick to it. It's sweet and just self-deprecating enough. It'll land well on video." I looked down. The script included things like, "I know I'm not exactly a prize, but somehow Taryn tolerates me. Behind every great woman is a confused man asking where the plates go. Taryn's taught me so much, like how to keep my mouth shut during wine night." I read the whole thing silently. Then I folded it, put it in my pocket, and I left. No yelling, no accusations. I just walked out of the elevator, down into the city night, and didn't look back. I turned off my phone and slept in my car by the river. The next morning, I woke up to 28 missed calls, 3 texts from her friends that said rude, and 1 from her that just read, "You ruined my night." Again. I didn't reply, and that was the last time I saw her for 6 weeks. But 6 weeks later, I showed up at another party, this time with someone else. And when Taryn saw who I walked in with, her perfect world cracked right down the center. The most interesting thing about vanishing is that no one believes you're serious until your silence drags on long enough to make them uncomfortable. Taryn didn't panic on day 1 or day 2. She thought I was sulking, probably assumed I was lying somewhere writing another sensitive poem to process her birthday humiliation. That's how she always framed my boundaries, as weaknesses, insecurities, immaturity. But by week 3, the texts changed tone. First came, "I think we should talk." Then, "I didn't mean to make you feel small." And finally, "You're being dramatic." This is exactly why I joke about you. I didn't reply to a single one. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was recovering. For the first time in years, I had a chance to hear my own thoughts without her voice interrupting them. I spent days wandering the city like a ghost with headphones. I bought groceries without being mocked for choosing the wrong brand. I sat at cafes and watched strangers, wondering how many couples were just pretending. I even started sketching again, something I hadn't done since she laughed at a portrait I once made of her and called it sweet. But yikes. Then one morning, at the world's emptiest bookstore on 6th Avenue, I met Junie. I didn't approach her, she approached me. I was flipping through a book on typography and graphic storytelling. Yes, I'm that guy. And she leaned over and said, funny how much power fonts hold. One curve in Helvetica, and you can ruin someone's day. It made me laugh. A real one. The kind that stumbles out when your guard is down. We didn't flirt. We talked. About fonts. About art. About how people sometimes only show you a version of themselves you're useful to. And how freeing it feels when you don't need to be useful to be valued. We bumped into each other again. Twice. And the third time, we sat down for coffee. By the end of week 6, I had told her more about myself than Taryn ever bothered to remember. Now here's where the universe decided to show off. It just so happened that my cousin Nova, who I hadn't spoken to in ages because Taryn thought she was too extra, was throwing an art gala in the city and had invited me months ago. I had ignored the RSVP, but when she messaged again and said, please come, and bring a date if you want. Everyone from back then will be there. Something in me lit up. I asked Junie, not as a statement, not as revenge, just because she made silence feel safe. She said yes. She wore a backless black dress and a silver choker with a single obsidian stone. She didn't try to stand out. She just did. And of course, because the universe loves drama, Taryn was there. She stood by the champagne bar, in a glittering dress that looked like it was sewn together from compliments. Her group of curated followers were around her, the same friends who once clapped when she roasted me in our kitchen. The moment she saw me, I swear she forgot how to breathe. Her smile froze mid-laugh. One of her friends turned to look and followed her stare. Then another, and there I was. In a fitted navy blazer I had no right pulling off, standing next to a woman who radiated grace without saying a single thing. I didn't say hi. I didn't wave. I just looked at her. And she blinked. Junie turned to me and whispered, do you want to leave? I shook my head. No, let's stay a while. I think she's still processing the moment. And oh, she was. She approached us 20 minutes later, of course. Her voice was tight, her tone syrupy with artificial sweetness. Ellis, she said, eyes scanning Junie up and down like a barcode. Didn't expect to see you here. With someone. Junie smiled politely and offered her hand. Junie, and you are? Taryn hesitated. For the first time in the entire time I'd known her, she didn't have a comeback ready. I'm his wife, she finally said. Junie tilted her head and looked at me. I stayed calm. Correction, I said, were. That chapter's closed. Taryn stared at me like I had just rewritten the ending of a story she thought she controlled. She turned to Junie and said, so, this is what you go for now. Junie blinked, not insulted, just confused. This? No, he's not a type. He's just someone who doesn't pretend anymore. I like that. Taryn didn't speak again. She just backed away, quietly. No crowd, no followers behind her. Just her and the echo of a reality she never saw coming. But what happened next, what she did 2 nights after the gala, changed everything again. And no, I'm not exaggerating. 2 nights after the gala, I was brushing my teeth with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. You know that strange weightlessness you feel when your body finally realizes it's no longer under threat? That was me. My phone was on silent, a quiet apartment, no guilt, no secondhand embarrassment, no pretending to laugh at things I didn't find funny. Just toothpaste and freedom. And then came the knock. Not a polite tap. Not the kind you hear from a neighbor asking if your Wi-Fi is down. No, this was sharp, insistent. Like someone demanding a piece of me. I froze, toothbrush halfway to the sink. I wasn't expecting anyone. Junie was out of town visiting her brother. My landlord always texted. And yet, something told me I already knew who it was. I opened the door. There she was. Taryn. Still beautiful, still styled to perfection, but the edges were fraying. Her lipstick was too red, the kind you wear when you're trying to distract from panic. Her heels wobbled slightly, but it wasn't the shoes. It was her entire sense of control slipping. And behind her, a man I'd never seen before. You'd think this part of the story would start with an apology, right? A tearful confession? A desperate plea to talk like adults. Nope. Her opening line. I thought maybe you'd grown up by now, but I guess I was wrong. I blinked. Didn't speak. Just let her unravel herself. She looked past me, like she was expecting to catch a glimpse of Junie, maybe hoping to catch us mid-moment, some twisted satisfaction in finding me vulnerable. When she didn't, she sighed and waved at the man behind her. This is Callum. He's just here to wait in the car. Callum nodded awkwardly. He looked like a mannequin someone forgot to dress properly. He turned away fast, uncomfortable. She stepped inside, uninvited, as if this was still her stage. I didn't stop her. She paced my living room like she owned it, then turned to face me and folded her arms. You're really proud of yourself, huh? Walking into that gala with some downtown poetry girl like you've reinvented yourself? I stayed silent. You know what I realized? She continued, voice rising. You need to feel like the victim. You've always needed that. The soft-spoken, wounded guy. It's your thing. But now you've turned it into a performance. You wanted me to hurt. Admit it. Still, I said nothing. She scoffed. Of course. Silent treatment. Classic Ellis. At that point, I finally spoke. Calm. Even. You didn't come here to fix anything. You came to win something. She flinched. I don't know if it's guilt or ego or some twisted game, but whatever it is, you're not getting it here. This isn't your mirror anymore. You don't get to rehearse your power here. She opened her mouth. Closed it. That tight jaw shake. The one she did when she wanted to scream but didn't know which version of herself to use. I gave you years, I added. I gave you all my softness. You treated it like it was a flaw. Junie didn't teach me to be someone else. She reminded me I never had to apologize for being this version of myself. And that's when the mask finally cracked. She sat down on the couch and whispered, barely audible, I didn't think you'd leave. There it was. The truth. No defense. No sarcasm. Just one sentence. And it hit harder than all her jabs ever did. Because deep down, she never thought I would. Not really. She thought I'd always wait. That no matter what she said, I'd always chase, always bend. Because that's what I always did. Until I didn't. I walked over to the door and held it open. Not angrily. Just ready. She stood up slowly. Her voice came back to its usual sharpness. Enjoy your little artist phase. It won't last. And then she walked out. But as she turned the corner of the hallway, she looked back. And for a single second, just one, I saw her face twist. Not in anger. Not in hatred. But in something else. Fear. Not of me. Not of Junie. But of a world where she wasn't the center anymore. And that fear would only grow in the days to come. Because while I thought this was the final chapter, it wasn't. The real twist was still coming. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. They just shifted into a new kind of stillness. The kind that hums below the surface when you know something isn't over, even if the words suggest it is. Taryn had walked out of my apartment, but not out of my life. Not yet. She lingered like smoke, curling into places I thought were finally clean. And I could feel it, that tightening energy. She wasn't done. Not because she still loved me, but because she hated being forgotten. She had always been the one to end things. The one to dismiss, belittle, define. And I had denied her the final word. At first, the signs were small. My old friend Lucas messaged me, confused. Hey, man, just ran into Taryn at the dog park. She said you were going through a depressive spiral and might need some space. Depressive spiral? I hadn't felt this mentally clear in years. Then my mother, who Taryn always pretended to adore in that passive, slightly dismissive way, called and asked if everything was okay. Taryn mentioned you've been isolating, she said. She seemed so concerned. I almost laughed. What Taryn was doing wasn't accidental. It was surgical. She was laying groundwork. Making sure when people looked at me, they didn't see someone who left for the right reasons. They'd see someone who lost it. A fragile, emotional man who couldn't handle a strong woman. The oldest trick in her book. But what she didn't know was that while she was busy weaving that narrative, I was quietly writing my own. See, I hadn't just met Junie. I'd started creating with her. And for the first time since college, I was designing something meaningful. Junie was putting together an independent exhibit, a raw, intimate, soul-bearing art show about emotional erosion and personal rebirth. She asked me to be one of the featured creators. Not because of pity, not because we were dating, but because she read a piece I wrote, a visual essay called Unloved But Loud, and said, this should hang in a room where someone can feel seen for the first time. I had never heard anything like that in my life. So while Taryn was telling people I was slipping, I was building something honest. Pages, illustrations, confessions turned into textures and colors. Every time I looked at what we were putting together, I felt like I had finally stepped out of a role and into myself. But then, exactly 1 week before the opening night of the gallery, I got an email from the event coordinator. Apparently, someone had anonymously sent a complaint about me, claiming I had a history of emotionally unstable behavior and had made women uncomfortable with obsessive tendencies. The coordinator said she was obligated to look into it, even though it sounded suspicious. I didn't even have to guess. It was textbook Taryn. Dress a lie in just enough truth, and it becomes a whisper people want to believe. And for a moment, I faltered. That old voice inside me, the one she fed for years, started whispering again. Maybe you are the problem. Maybe this is your fault. Maybe you should just step back and stay quiet. But then Junie saw the email. She didn't hesitate. She called the coordinator herself, calmly explained everything, and said, "You're about to hang Ellis's work in a room full of people who need it. If you take it down because of a jealous ex-wife trying to rewrite history, then you're helping silence the exact voices we claim to lift." The coordinator relented. She apologized. The complaint was dropped. But the damage Taryn tried to do? That wasn't over. Because on the night of the exhibit, while people were standing in front of my piece, quietly tearing up, something happened that none of us could have predicted. Taryn showed up. She walked into that gallery like she had every right to be there. She wore white, of course. Subtle message. Purity. Innocence. The ex-wife who just wanted to support her former partner. Junie spotted her first. I saw her eyes narrow, then her lips pressed together. But she didn't approach. Neither did I. We just watched. And then Taryn did something that made the air freeze. She stood in front of my piece, unloved but loud, and said, just loud enough for the surrounding people to hear, "Wow. It's like trauma tourism. All this just because I joked about his shirts being wrinkled?" Laughter. Nervous chuckles from strangers who didn't know what was happening. But before I could step in, Junie did. She walked up beside Taryn, folded her arms, and said softly, "You have 5 seconds to walk away before I explain, in graphic detail, what humiliation really feels like." Taryn turned. "Excuse me." Junie didn't blink. "You heard me. You're not here for art. You're here for control. And we don't hang that kind of energy on these walls." Taryn stood still, jaw clenched. Her gaze flicked to me, expecting, maybe hoping, I'd defend her. That I'd say, "Don't make a scene," like I used to. That I'd calm it all down. But I didn't say anything. And this time, my silence wasn't weak. It was power. She left, stormed out, heels clacking. And as the door closed behind her, something settled in my chest that I didn't have a word for yet. Closure? Maybe. But what came next, just days later, shattered any sense of peace I thought I had. Because Taryn wasn't done. She had one last move. And it was personal. After the gallery incident, I finally thought we'd reached some kind of finish line. Taryn had made her last petty public jab, got shut down, and left in a cloud of discomfort. I figured she'd either move on, or at the very least, retreat into silence. That's what narcissists do when the applause dies. They vanish until they can find a new stage. For a brief moment, I had peace. Junie and I took a weekend trip to the coast. We stayed in a strange little rental that smelled like lavender and sea salt. I remember lying on the porch, watching her read under a crooked lantern, thinking, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Simple, unstaged. But the peace didn't last. Because 2 days after we got back, I got a call from HR. Not from my job, from a freelance client I'd worked with on and off for years. A nonprofit that builds art programs for underserved schools. I'd just wrapped up a project for them a month prior, and I'd been expecting follow-up work, the kind that paid the rent. But the voice on the other end of the phone wasn't calling about design feedback. They were investigating a complaint. Specifically, that I had sent inappropriate messages to a female colleague during a project. The complaint didn't mention names, just dates and screenshots that had conveniently been lost in a system error. I sat there, stunned, as the director awkwardly told me they were placing future contracts with me on hold until things were resolved. They weren't accusing me. Not directly. But you know how it works. Reputation is a currency, and all it takes is a shadow to make your value plummet. As soon as the call ended, I felt the heat rise in my chest. I knew who did it. I just couldn't prove it, yet. Taryn had crossed from petty to predatory. She wasn't just annoyed that I'd moved on. She was trying to erase me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge. This was about her narrative. She wasn't angry that I left. She was furious that she wasn't the one who got to leave me and still be the hero. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I had: timestamps, project threads, calendar events, email logs, anything that showed I wasn't even working with a female colleague during that project cycle. I even called the team lead from the nonprofit, a woman named Fiona who thankfully remembered everything clearly. With her help, we got the complaint dismissed. No apology, of course. Just a thanks for your cooperation. We consider the matter closed. But something deeper broke in me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even about Taryn. It was about the version of myself that would have once apologized for things I didn't do, just to keep the peace. The Ellis who used to sit in the car outside parties too long, rehearsing lines, just so I wouldn't embarrass her. The Ellis who flinched when her phone rang, knowing it could be another reminder of what I wasn't. That man, he was gone, and Taryn didn't know it yet. So I made a decision. I sent her a letter. A printed one. No email. No text. Inside was a single photo, a Polaroid from the gallery, where Junie and I stood beside my piece, smiling as a crowd gathered behind us. Underneath, I'd written one line. You don't get to rewrite my story. You were just a chapter. No threats. No anger. Just a closing line she couldn't erase. But of course, Taryn doesn't take endings well. That letter was a fuse. And the fire it lit? It burned fast. And in a direction I never saw coming. Because just when I thought her games had peaked, she reached out to the one person I never thought she'd touch. My sister. And what she told her nearly ruined everything I'd rebuilt. I hadn't spoken to my sister Violet in a while. Not because anything was wrong, but because she had just given birth to twins and was understandably neck-deep in diapers and sleep deprivation. I adored her. She was the only family member who never saw me as too sensitive or too much. She actually liked that I felt things deeply, said I was the kind of man the world kept trying to break and reshape. So when I saw her name flash across my phone screen, I smiled. Then I read the message. Hey, can we talk? Something happened, and I need to ask you directly before I jump to conclusions. My stomach nodded immediately. That's the kind of text that comes before an emotional detonation. I called her without hesitation. She answered instantly. Ellis, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you ever get physical with Taryn during one of your arguments? I froze. What? I asked, stunned. She messaged me. Violet said, voice shaking with restrained fury. Said she's been struggling for years to recover from the emotional trauma of your marriage. Claimed she felt unsafe with you sometimes. That you had a temper. That you'd once grabbed her arm so hard she had bruises. My throat dried out. I couldn't find words. Ellis, she said. I told her I didn't believe a word of it. But I still had to ask. Because you're my brother, and I know how much she messed with your head. But if there's any truth to it. There's not, I whispered. Violet, I never laid a hand on her. I never even raised my voice in front of her. And that was the unbearable truth. I had spent so many years absorbing her anger, her digs, her icy silences, that I barely had space left to feel anything at all. If I had raised my voice even once, she would have filmed it, framed it, paraded it around like a trophy. But I didn't. Because back then, I was terrified that even defending myself would be seen as aggression. Taryn knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't need to prove anything. All she had to do was imply, plant a seed of doubt, and let the people who loved me water it with fear. Violet was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I believe you. I knew she was manipulative, but this is different. This is targeted. And that's when I realized something else. Taryn wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation. She was trying to isolate me, cut off the support system she once mocked me for needing, make me look like the kind of man who couldn't be trusted, not just professionally, but personally. Because in her mind, if she couldn't have control over me, she would control how others saw me. I thanked Violet for coming to me first. We cried a little. She told me the twins missed their art uncle. We made plans to visit. But after the call, I sat there in silence, heart hammering, realizing how close she had come to poisoning the one relationship I hadn't lost to her toxicity. One well-placed lie. That's all it would have taken. I called Junie next. Told her everything. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't gasp or spiral or tell me to be careful. She just sat with it, processed it. And then she said something I'll never forget. She's escalating because she knows she already lost you. Desperate people don't care about consequences. They care about control. She's not playing to win anymore. She's playing not to disappear. And that's exactly what it was. Taryn was fading from relevance. And she was clawing her way back into the narrative like a drowning performer who couldn't handle the final curtain call. That night, Junie suggested something bold. Something I hadn't even considered. What if you tell the truth first, before she can rewrite it again? Not in anger, not as revenge, but publicly, openly. My chest tightened at the thought. Like online. No, she said, shaking her head. Something better. A collection. A digital story. A timeline of everything. What you went through, how you survived it, how you healed. Not to shame her, but to reclaim your own voice. It sounded terrifying, exposing, vulnerable, but also right. And so I began. Every late night, every quiet morning, I sat down and poured pieces of my life onto the screen. Not as rants, as records. Things I had never told anyone, not even Junie. By the time I finished the first chapter, I realized something unexpected. This wasn't just about protecting myself. This was about freeing myself. But I wasn't the only one reading it. Because 1 week later, I got a message from someone I never expected to hear from. Someone who had known Taryn long before I did. And what they told me shattered the version of her I thought I knew. I didn't recognize the name when the message came in. It landed in the filtered inbox of my design page, the one I barely checked, the one mostly filled with spam and discount codes from art supply stores I couldn't afford. But something about the subject line made me pause. You don't know me, but I knew her before you. My heart dropped. I clicked it open, half expecting a troll, half expecting a warning. What I read instead felt like a key slipping into a lock I hadn't realized was still bolted shut. The sender's name was Micah D., and he claimed to have dated Taryn 8 years before she and I met. His message wasn't long. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even dramatic. It was calm, detailed, painfully honest. He had seen the digital story I'd been working on, the one Junie encouraged me to start posting online. He hadn't commented, hadn't liked anything, but he'd read every word. And he said it was like déjà vu. Almost everything I had described, the emotional manipulation, the carefully curated public persona, the private sarcasm, the way she used affection as a reward for compliance. He had lived through it too. Down to the same phrases, the same jokes. He said he'd only broken free when one of his friends secretly recorded her berating him during a party and played it back the next day. That tape, he said, was what finally cut through the spell. He still had the audio, and he attached it. I didn't press play at first. I sat there with my finger hovering over it, stomach clenched, breath shallow. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe I was afraid of hearing her voice again, not in memory, but in someone else's nightmare. But eventually, I clicked it. It was grainy, background noise cluttered with music and muffled laughter, but Taryn's voice cut through like a shard of glass. You're embarrassing. You don't even realize how hard I worked to make you look tolerable. If I left, you'd collapse in 2 weeks. Don't act like you're the victim. You're lucky I haven't replaced you already. Silence. Then a man's voice, Micah's, quietly saying, I don't think I can do this anymore. She laughed. Cold. Dismissive. Good luck finding someone who wants all this without a paycheck. I sat frozen. Because I had heard that laugh. I had lived inside that silence. And somehow, knowing it had happened before didn't make me feel less broken. It made me feel less alone. I called Junie and played it for her over speaker. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she whispered, how many other people did she leave like this? Half built and half convinced it was their fault? Micah's message ended with this. I never warned anyone about her. I didn't want to seem bitter or dramatic. But reading your story made me realize silence protects people like her. So if this helps you in any way, take it. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You just loved someone who used your love like a leash. I cried harder than I'd cried in years. Because after all the damage, after all the mind games and smirks and gaslit memories, someone else finally said it out loud. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't the problem. I was just one of the many. I messaged Micah back. We talked for over 2 hours that night. Shared timelines, names, patterns. And by the end of the conversation, one thing was clear. Taryn hadn't just moved on after me. She had recycled her manipulation. With a new name, new circle, new facade, but the same cruel patterns underneath. And worst of all, she was now engaged. To a man named Wesley. A quiet, academic type from Seattle who posted about mental health advocacy and volunteered with at-risk teens. Micah had stumbled onto the engagement announcement while searching her name. Wesley looked kind, earnest, familiar, too familiar, because we had both been Wesley, and we both knew what he was walking into. Micah asked me, should we reach out to him? At first, I didn't know. It felt invasive, presumptive. What if he thought we were the bitter exes she warned him about? But then I remembered Violet. I remembered the phone call, the look in her eyes when she asked if I'd ever been violent. I remembered how close I had come to losing the people who loved me, all because no one had warned them. I didn't want to destroy Taryn's life, but I couldn't let her destroy another person's soul. So we drafted a message. Not accusatory, not dramatic, just honest. Wesley never replied. But the next morning, her engagement announcement was gone. And so was her Instagram. That silence was louder than any response we could have gotten. But what followed, the final twist, was something none of us expected. Because a few days later, Junie got a phone call from a blocked number. And when she picked up, the voice on the other end wasn't mine. It wasn't Micah's. It was Taryn. And she wasn't calling to apologize. The call came in on a Sunday afternoon. Junie and I had just come back from the market with arms full of overpriced fruit and warm bread. We were laughing about how I'd managed to knock over a display of apples for the second time that month. My special gift, apparently. She had just started putting things away when her phone buzzed, face down on the counter. She froze when she saw the screen. Blocked number, she muttered. Neither of us moved. Then, curiosity won. She answered, placed it on speaker. Silence for a second, followed by a sharp inhale. Junie. We both recognized the voice immediately. Taryn. She sounded different. Less composed. Less performed. I know I shouldn't be calling, she said quickly, breath hitching. I saw everything. The posts, the story, what you're both doing. And now people are asking questions. It's affecting my job. My friends. My engagement's over. Her voice cracked. For a second, I saw the familiar mask trying to hold. I just needed to say, I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think anyone would believe you. Junie didn't blink. She didn't gloat. Her voice was calm, even kind. You didn't think people would believe the truth? Taryn was quiet. Then she whispered, he left me. Wesley. He said he read the message, and he saw the signs. I didn't even get to explain. You had years to explain, Junie replied softly. Taryn started crying. Not the theatrical, practiced kind I'd seen before, the real kind. The kind that doesn't want attention, just space to collapse. And in that moment, something strange happened inside me. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't need her anymore. She asked Junie, what are you going to do next? Keep telling the story? Junie looked at me, then back at the phone. No, she said. The story's told. People saw it. They'll carry it. We're not here to destroy you, Taryn. We're here to make sure no one else gets erased the way Ellis did. Taryn said thank you, quietly, and hung up. That was the last time we ever heard from her. Weeks passed. The digital story I'd started kept growing, not just in shares, but in reach. More people, men, women, siblings, ex-partners, messaged me with stories of being quietly broken down and learning how to piece themselves back together. I didn't become famous. I didn't go viral. But I became free. And not just from Taryn, from the guilt, the shame, the endless question of, was it really that bad? It was. And I survived it. Junie and I stayed together. We built something real, rooted in mutual respect, not rescue. She doesn't fix me. I don't complete her. We're just two people choosing each other over and over, quietly, in the small, ordinary moments that never make it into dramatic stories. And sometimes, that's the most extraordinary thing of all. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced something that made you question your reality, or fought your way back from someone else's version of your story, we want to hear about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What part of this story hit you the hardest, or reminded you of someone you once were? See you next time.